The Silver Screen Project.
Welcome to the Silver Screen Project, where we look back at a series of films in anticipation of an exciting new cinema release.
In preparation for the new Christopher Nolan film Oppenheimer, we went back and watched his first big hit, Memento, and then watched his other World War II film, Dunkirk. We've also been covering Manhattan Project-themed things for our main podcast, The Project. So we were well prepared, and it finally came. We finally went and saw Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, it was dense. It was detailed. It was just like it was more of a kind of biopic of this man's troubled life than I expected in a way. And I really liked the kind of witch hunt kind of angle that they went for, like the slight courtroom drama kind of.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Public witch hunt kind of vibe. Yeah. What about
Yeah,
yourself?
no, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was brilliant. I liked that it was more of a biopic than just the Manhattan Project. One person I went with was a little bit disappointed with it, and I kind of had to remind them that the film was Oppenheimer, not Enola Gay. Like, Oppenheimer's life didn't end in 1945.
Well, exactly, and he didn't witness a lot of the things firsthand that he might have assumed that.
But I thought it was really good. We talked last week about potentially that like the bomb dropping maybe like halfway through the film. It's closer to the end. It's like 2/3 in, really.
But it's not something we ever.
Yeah, we are going to do non-spoilers first. But I like the fact that like there was more told than just
absolutely
the bomb.
Yeah, I was surprised when it kind of goes back to his early life. Very early on. I mean, it's the time to do it in most films. But you know, I really liked the angle that they took with him kind of struggling with kind of mental illness / kind of at one point I thought it was going to go into like a Lovecraftian cosmic horror kind of, because it's like plagued by visions of other worlds. But he is more him having not necessarily understanding the things that he's thinking. It had an interesting angle to that, and I kind of wish they'd done a bit more of that, to be honest. But I feel like it was in nice kind of thirds, really, wasn't it? It was,
and that's the thing. Like it was a 3-hour film, but like it was a super like ambitious project to do all of that. And even though like it is long, particularly towards the end, it may feel a bit long, but I can't think of any bits that you're like, cut that.
No.
Usually when films are that long, even if they're really good, you're like, oh, you probably could have done without that scene. But because it's such a dense, full story, it's hard to think of any bits that would.
Yeah, we totally agree. I think in a way it was probably slightly too squished in a way. There were certain bits with what I don't know if we're doing positives, negatives, whatever, but there's certain bits with dialogue where it was quite kind of sharply edited, where it was like someone was talking and then the other person talking.
Yeah.
You know, first time maybe not being super switched onto that, found that slightly hard to follow at times. So if anything, if they'd cut it more, I think that would have been an even worse problem. So I think it was that's probably the shortest this film could be without like taking out plot lines or stories. And
definitely I think before we go into spoilers, I think the cast is amazing. It's got so many people in it,
massive
and
cast.
like huge A-list actors turn up for like one scene, and it's just like this is like ridiculous. Just every scene was like, oh, it's that guy. It's like, oh, it's that guy.
And it's not even just like Nolan kind of alumni, is it?
It
there are some, but
it took me like 2 days to recognize Alden Ehrenreich. And I was like, oh, it's fucking Han Solo.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's loads of people in it, and like they're all excellent. When we get into spoilers, I'll talk about a couple of performances in particular that I thought were brilliant.
Okay,
I know before we get into spoilers as well, on our main podcast, the last episode we recorded was a retelling of the actual story, which will come out shortly after this. Yeah. But for me, going into this, it was quite funny because it was like when you like read a dense book and then watch like the film adaptation of it, because like there's so many bits where like a character would turn up and you're like, oh, I know that guy, or like
there was a couple of moments where they'd mention something in passing, like even. This isn't the spoiler. He's like, and I was rubbish at lab work, and I was like, Lewis told us about that.
Yeah,
it was just like it was some of it matched exactly up, and some of it was just like fleeting references to stuff that you'd spent more time on.
And then there's certain characters that come up, and I'm like, oh, I know what's gonna happen with him. It was quite fun. Like, I'm glad like I had kind of done all that research just before seeing it, 'cause it did kind of like add to the. And I think because there's so many people in this. And it's not just like big actors. There's so many physicists and stuff that you go through. It'd be easy to get lost in who's who and what that person.
I think this is like a very vague, non-spoiler criticism, and it's one of the only ones I have really, is just that because the cast is so big, you don't really get a chance to spend a lot of time with everybody. And there are some actors in there I really like that just we don't spend much time because either they're not a big part of the story or they didn't have a massive impact on Oppenheimer's life. And, you know, that's not really a criticism, but it's just like, hey, I like Jack Quaid. I would like to see a bit more of him.
I was thinking exactly of Jack Quaid. The fact that he was like a physicist that we've heard of as well. And he's not really in it much.
And that, I suppose as well, sometimes there's characters in there who don't really get named and you kind of have to figure out who they are. And I think Jack Quaid was a little bit like that, where it was kind of like, oh, is he, you know, blah, blah. So yeah, very, very minor criticism. I could probably think of more things while we talk through in spoilers, but
yeah. So shall we go into spoilers?
Let's go into spoilers.
So a couple of let's talk about the cast. We're kind of on that topic. I think it was kind of fun having like people like Kenneth Branagh turn up as Niels Bohr for like 2 or 3 scenes. Oh yeah, Gary Oldman turn up as Truman for a scene, and it was just like,
that was another bit where when he gets kicked out and he's like, "Don't ever let that little like bitch back in again." I was like, "Oh yeah, that's what they said."
There was lots of things like that. I was like, "Oh," and then there was like some developments and stuff, like the whole thing with not bombing Kyoto because it was actually a honeymoon, which. I think I'd mentioned that, like, he thought it was a cultural place, and after the film, looking it up, he did honeymoon there, and that was a big reason. So it's added detail.
And was that Truman as well then? Because he looked really different in that.
No, that was Henry Stimson, the Secretary for War.
Right. Yes. Was he played by a Skarsgård?
Maybe I think it was somebody Gustav Skarsgård,
brother of Stellan, I think. I was like, I really recognise this guy, but I couldn't remember.
But obviously Cillian Murphy is the main one. I think he's exceptional. Like,
he's fantastic.
I've seen some people talk about how 90% of this film has just got like a dour face for most of it.
But I think he had quite a range of emotions compared to his normal characters.
I think like in the kind of post-bomb scenes, he looks depressed most of the time, but that fits the character. But like particularly his younger self, when he's with kind of the other physicists, when he's with like the communist and his various lovers, he seems much more like charming and charismatic, and you're like, oh yeah, and he does look fucking stick thin as well.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, no, I thought they did a really good job as well at aging him between the different days. So he has the kind of floppy student hair, and then we see him at his very oldest when he's getting the medal in the flash forwards.
It looked like to me like it was more makeup than CGI aging.
I think so
and it worked really well, and it wasn't just him. There's other characters like Robert Downey Jr. You see a younger version and an older version.
Yeah,
a lot of it is just like hair thinning and stuff.
That's it. Yeah,
but like. It genuinely like.
But there's probably 4 or 5 different stages of Oppenheimer in this. And like some of it's just hair, like you say. Some of it is like when he's having the kind of hearing, you know, in the small room without the crowd kind of thing. You can see he's even more gaunt than ever, and he's got kind of aging in his eyes and that sort of thing.
And it adds to the performance as well that like Cillian Murphy. He seems like an old man in those scenes, and then in those early scenes, he's kind of jumping around like a youth of today who's just like looking forward to the world. I thought that was great. I think Robert Downey Jr. was another one that I thought was
I wasn't
phenomenal.
expecting him to be such a presence in this.
No,
and he's almost like second lead in a way, isn't he? Like he's the main supporting actor, I would say, really.
And the whole
maybe
kind
other
of
than maybe Emily Blunt, but even her, she's not in it a lot. She has some moments.
And kind of like so it's kind of got a 3-pronged storyline of the main Oppenheimer life, the Oppenheimer Security Council meeting, and then also the Congress Council with Robert Downey Jr.
Which is the black and white. Well, the black and white stuff is that plus whatever he's telling. So there's the scene with the the flowers in the middle of the table and he keeps moving the vase around.
Yeah.
We see that both in black and white and in colour. And I couldn't tell if there was any major differences, but it could be that their tellings of that story were slightly different, I imagine.
The black and white stuff, Robert Downey Jr. is pretty much the lead in the black and white stuff. Yeah. He's really good as well. Like, obviously, the big almost twist in this is the turn that he's a villain in a way.
Yeah, I thought that was quite a good inclusion, although it's a little bit like, it's not silly, but it's like, does this film need a villain? It's a biopic.
Yeah.
But it kind of added that little element of like closure and like a little win for us.
Yeah.
Before then turning it around with the kind of end of the film.
And it's done really well. I mean, when I mentioned in the report, so I'm going to keep referencing it. But I remember mentioning in that towards the end that Lewis Strauss kind of headed this committee to get rid of Oppenheimer.
Yes.
And then when we first see it, he's quite a likable guy. And I was like, have I mischaracterized Lewis Strauss in this report? And then when the kind of reveal comes and he is kind of the villain, I was like, oh yeah, no, he is portrayed as the bad guy in this.
No, he absolutely is. No, I thought his performance was very good with Alden Ehrenreich as well, who is kind of almost getting the one up on him as much as he can, because he kind of leads him on to think that he's going to win the vote, and it's like, how would I have known, kind of thing. We've got all the press here and all that.
Yeah, and Alden Ehrenreich clearly doesn't like him,
and you see that evolution through the hour or so that they're in that room, however long it's supposed to be. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. I think generally speaking, as a Nolan film, you know the kind of sound and soundtrack are going to be good.
Yeah,
there's excellent use of sound.
There's Ludwig Göransson again, wasn't it?
Yeah, rather than kind of, I would say it's one of his quieter films in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
and there was some really like excellent use of quiet and silence in this film. So the Trinity Test is the example that
I was going to say
of.
That scene in general, particularly the sound, was mind-blowing.
And I thought the one thing that I was kind of silly is when him and Florence Pugh are first hooking up and she's like, read some Sanskrit for me, and it's like,
I thought it was so funny.
But then that's the audio that's playing. It's like them kind of having sex and you can hear the kind of breathing. And then the I am dead.
I thought it was so funny that they used that, because we discussed whether or not they're going to put the line in there, and I thought they put it into a sex scene. It was so funny. But yeah, that scene in general, like the cinematography, the light, 'cause you kind of see it from three different perspectives, and like the light on their face, and it's just completely silent as they kind of slowly take their goggles off and kind of realize the enormity of what's happened, and then the sudden bang of the sound.
A lot of people were jumped in the cinema when that happened.
And it was like incredible, and like it kind of really like hit me. I was just like, fuck, like this is powerful, like, because it's not just kind of like here's this scene. It's also like you can, in kind of Oppenheimer's face and stuff, you can see the implications of what they've just done. Like the genie's out the bottle.
Well, that's it.
We've changed the world forever now. Kind of thing.
I think one thing they do really well, and this is something that we spoke about in the report last episode when you did the report. I was going to say last week. We recorded it last week, but I think it's coming out today, same as this episode. But is kind of the motivation to carry on to complete the Manhattan Project, and I feel like they do a good job of saying like Oppenheimer's reasons to do it, kind of thing. And he's like, it's not necessary to make the weapon, to use the weapon. It's partly because of doing the thing for science, but also partly because someone else is going to do it, and they need to do it before they do it. And I just feel like that was justified very well.
Yeah, I like the fact that like they, in things like that, like they spend the whole film talking about the Nazis and attacking the Nazis, and it's only towards the very end where they suddenly turn and be like, we're going to attack Japan.
Well, it's that meeting that all the other scientists are having, and he walks in and they're like, well, Hitler's dead, so what are we going to do? And then he's still kind of defending it at that point. And then they do the Trinity Test, and like you say, you see his face. And then the other scene that really had the great use of sound for me was the kind of almost the rally after, where he's giving the speech, and the crowd are getting more and more feral, and it's kind of
overwhelming.
And it goes between that, and we hear that kind of foot stamping sound, and we see that a couple of times earlier in the film. It's nicely kind of cut together. And he starts seeing like the visions of what he's done, and he sees like the burnt body, and
which is quite powerful as well, because we never see the bombings, we never see the effects. We hear about it. We hear about it same way Oppenheimer did. Over the radio, and then gets a call from Groves. So it's like, it's kind of powerful. Just seeing that one kind of burnt body on the floor kind of impacts just as much as seeing a whole destroyed city.
That's it. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It was very good. Some of those.
Yeah,
bits.
I think kind of touching on that as well. I think because we've just kind of discussed the reality very recently, it was kind of clear that like they've really kind of nailed their historical accuracy as well. Obviously it's focusing on Oppenheimer and how he felt, but like the timeline of events, the people involved, it just seems like everything was spot on to how it happened.
Yeah, I think the only parts that could have been little smudged or added to were like some of the personal life stuff. I don't really know about that too much. We didn't go into masses of detail, so I don't know. And some of the kind of communist side that we talked about and we kind of thought they would kind of focus on, I'm sure there is evidence there of lots of that stuff. But it made for a better film, so I'm not really fussed either way. But yeah, all the kind of main facts and figures seem to be spot on.
The only thing that we had different in the report than that, which it may have been my mistake on researching, or maybe they just cut it, was Niels Bohr, Kenneth Branagh's character, in the film kind of turned up, said, I'm not working on the project, and left, when in reality, I think he actually did work on it for a bit because he was friends with Richard Feynman and stuff.
Right.
But when that's like the only thing, then you're like, they've done a pretty good job.
I mean, I mean, the kind of affairs going back and forth we did talk about with the report. I didn't know about, I got confused between the two names afterwards. Jean was Florence Pugh, wasn't she? About her committing suicide. I don't know if we ever
we didn't mention that.
But I thought that was all very interesting as well. It added a whole other element to it. You spoke about him being like a womanizer, and they talk about it in this. And there's the funny bit where there's the third woman as well that he talks to, and they're like, "Oh, they think you're having an affair," and he's found out and killed himself. And it's like, "Oh no, they never found out." And it's like just an offhand thing. That
I like the fact that like even though it was a film about Oppenheimer and about the Manhattan Project, it didn't like hide away from the rest of his life. The womanizing, the communist links were a kind of central parts to the character and the man himself. So I'm glad they didn't try and because I mean he's such a contradictory character anyway. You can't tell a story about the man who created the atomic bomb and just show him in like a good light.
No.
And they don't do that at all. I saw some people be like, "Oh, of course they made him a hero." It's like they definitely didn't.
No.
You come out of this, you don't think he's a good person.
Even the meeting where he goes and he's like, "Oh, we still need to keep working on it." Like, arguably, he could have convinced, because they talk a lot of time about the cult of Oppenheimer and the cult of Oppie and all that. Yeah. And they say like he built that town and everyone really looked up to him. Yeah, he could have said to all those scientists at that meeting, "Well, let's all stop," and then they probably would have all stopped. So a lot of it is on him. It's not all on him, but the way things went.
And it kind of does highlight the fact that like you can like criticize a person's character whilst also having sympathy for them and the guilt they felt, which is kind of the message of this film.
Yeah, and I feel like going back to the very start and you know seeing him throughout his life really does help you empathize with him, and you see that he had a troubled life, and some of it was his fault and some of it wasn't his fault, and it was just, and one of my favorite parts was the very end of it, where we see the discussion between Oppenheimer and Albert Einstein at the pond. We find out what Strauss was getting so upset about the whole time, and one of the reasons and it was him saying, "Well, we have started the chain reaction, or maybe we've started the chain reaction."
Yeah, I thought that was a really it was a really powerful ending. Yeah. It kind of does leave you with that sense of like, holy shit, they did start something that can't be stopped.
Exactly.
And you're like, wow. Yeah, and I'm glad that like that scene's kind of referenced 2 or 3 times, but we never know what they're talking about. And when it gets to the end, I was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm so glad I finally get to hear it. And then it's a worthwhile conversation. I'm like, oh, I'm glad this lived up to it.
And it's funny because that comes off the back as well of old Neuronoric being like, well, maybe they were talking about something that was nothing to do with you and much more important.
Yeah.
And it was that as
I did
well.
Like
so
that line. Maybe it was one of the things that's more important than you.
Yeah.
Another scene that I thought was a great performance as well was Emily Blunt at the testimony. When obviously her and Robert Oppenheimer have had their differences. She's aware that he's been having affairs. But when it gets to it, she's like the only person who kind of stands up to the prosecutor.
And she kind of has the moment where she seems like she's kind of shaking and she's not quite pulled herself together. And then she just switches and she's like...
it's like she owned that scene and it's like, fair
and
play.
It kind of, you know, in a way redeems her character. I mean, I didn't love her character throughout. She's obviously troubled in lots of various ways.
Yeah.
Some of which is nothing to do with, you know, it's not her fault at all. She seemed to just have various, I don't know, mental health problems or whatever.
And drinking problems.
But like from the point where they're together, it seemed like their relationship was just pretty shit, to be honest.
Yeah.
And just her, like, everything with the baby and stuff was just like stressful. I was like, oh no, I don't know what's happening here.
It's nice to see her kind of have her moment.
Yeah, and it was like, you know, she's passionate about something, I guess. And she was kind of being like, defend yourself. She was being a bit over the top about it, like smashing glasses in the hotel room and stuff. But
Yeah. Another thing that I thought they did quite well was, obviously it's a film about science and based on a load of scientists, and they did kind of make the science of it. They didn't go overhand with it. But they have to have a certain amount, and they made it like understandable. Like,
I would say so.
I didn't get lost in the science at any point. I was like, oh yeah, I get what they're talking about. Apart from the bits where they intentionally go overly complex, because like even the physicists aren't meant to understand what he's talking about, kind of thing. But it's like, oh yeah, they have put this in a way that
I would agree.
I can understand.
They touched on different bits, and even as I mentioned at the start, the little bits that we see at the start of kind of almost subatomic little worlds of like flashes of abstract imagery. Thought that kind of gets you into it really nicely, and it gets you kind of visually kind of stimulated. And then there's some like, even the fishbowl and the thing full of marbles is like a nice kind of visual aid to help you think about certain things. It's clearly a very well thought out film. And, you know, of course it is. It's 3 hours and it's Christopher Nolan, like it would be. But there's something that's not really related. But I realised as I was finishing watching this that this is the second time that Cillian Murphy's played a physicist who makes a bomb. Because in Sunshine, he's the guy who makes the bomb to reignite the sun. And I was like, oh, he's got a bit of a history with this character.
Another thing that we kind of touched on things similar. Was the use with the sound and the cinematography of when he's kind of having flashback to bomb. So there's a bit where he's in that kind of, where that prosecutor's having a go at him. And it slowly gets brighter and the sound gets more and more. It just becomes really tense.
The wall shaking behind him as well.
Like they use that effect a few times. And it's quite like powerful to see his like mental state in a sense of panic, essentially. And I was like,
that's when he's really shouting at him, isn't he? Like really winding him up. And then he kind of retorts back and says something that kind of lets slip or something a little bit. It was way more kind of courtroom drama than I expected, although it wasn't in a real big courtroom. There's the Senate stuff, you know, on occasion.
It was quite a good way of telling the story, like setting up the narrative of him retelling his story to a prosecutor, essentially. And it's good fun. All the other scientists had their moments. One of the things we kind of mentioned before, somebody turns up is when what's his name? Klaus Fuchs turns up, which is a funny little interchange, because when Oppenheimer, he's like, "Oh, I'm Klaus Fuchs," and he's like, "Oh, how long have you been British?" But he was the person that turned spy.
And that's the whole thing of because that's the thing that at one point they're saying there was no spy, and I guess that's before they found out.
So it's 1949 we found out. So I think his prosecution stuff was set in 47, and the Robert Downey Jr. court case was like 49 or something. So I think it was just after that. So it timed out quite well. But when he turned up, I was like, oh, don't trust this guy.
And we even had Szilard. There was little bits with Leo Szilard was in the underground bit, and he shows up again later. And Fermi was with him as well.
You see, and obviously they came up more in the report.
Yes, but they mentioned the letter being written though, which is what started off the whole thing.
But and it was fun just seeing all these different people.
Bit of what's he called? Heisenberg as well. Which is exactly what you thought. It's just a short,
the fact that it was the young cast member I mentioned is like probably going to be early on. Also, I like the added story of him poisoning the apple.
Yeah,
that's a fun little.
It is a fun little bit, and it again, it kind of ties into his kind of mental instability in his youth and how much of that. I kind of wish that had come back a little bit more. Maybe there could have been another reference to it.
Yeah,
but I suppose it's just like one little example that shows that he's been a little bit messed up from the start, kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you have anything else?
No. I was just looking up who played the Heisenberg, and it's the safe guy from Army of the Dead. I thought it was him, but I can't remember. I thought that Einstein was a bit of a weird inclusion. I enjoyed the scenes, but I just felt like some of the times when he appeared, it felt like a bit of like a weird cameo. Like there's one time where a truck pulls away and he's just standing behind it, and I was like, I guess it's an Einstein scene again. But you know,
one criticism I have seen is that like it's something like 25 minutes into the film before a woman talks, and then within like a minute she has sex with Oppenheimer. And like part of me is like, yeah, that is a negative, but like,
yeah,
on the other side, like it's when it's a biopic, it's like it was just. I mean, you get more women as physicists later on, which was cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, there's one.
I think in the audience when they're all clapping his speech, there's a few in there. But like, it is one of those that's like, there's only so much you can do while sticking with historical accuracy.
This as well, and it's like I think I only saw like one black character as well, which is in that crowd scene. And I was thinking about this, and maybe earlier on with students and stuff. But I noticed in that scene, I was like, oh, there's a black guy there. Oh shit! Like this is only, like, and so,
I think the fact that like it's so dominated by white men, I think it's kind of less of a criticism of the film, more of a criticism of the time,
of history.
It's like in the 40s, like places were just full of white men. That is just how it was, unfortunately.
I can see that. I mentioned earlier about the kind of dialogue stuff. I think particularly in the kind of middle third, I felt like there was quite a lot of scenes where, or at least a couple that I noted, where like as soon as someone finished talking, the other person would start talking straight away. So it really felt like people were almost like racing to get their lines out. And that to me felt like there was like a millisecond cut to try and get more in. That's the only thing I could think of, because
I guess it might have also just been like adding to the tension, depending on the scene,
because then certain bits would be like, then people would take a break to like, you know, react or whatever. But it was just, I think it's when it's so kind of dialogue dense and there's lots of exposition / scientific stuff, it was something that I was kind of like, I don't love this about this film, but it might just be a stylistic choice as well.
Another thing is that we were told there was going to be full frontal nudity, and apparently that's just Florence Pugh's boobs. Like that wasn't really full frontal.
I also, everyone kept saying there's 15 minutes of nudity in this, and I don't think.
Well, there's that one scene where they're both naked chatting.
Yeah, but that cuts between that and the other thing, and
they both have their legs crossed so that you're seeing as little as possible.
Very disappointed.
I want to see Cillian Murphy's dick.
I know, right? and I did like actually the scene where he's revealing that he had the affair, and and he's then suddenly naked in the room, and then suddenly Florence Pugh is there and looking straight into Emily Blunt's eyes. Like,
that was quite
I really like. See, this reminded me of when we were talking about the Hummingbird Project, and we were talking about how you could make a boring, what we thought was a biopic, well, what I thought was a biopic, interesting, is to add in kind of weird, abstract flights of fancy, kind of mental kind of images.
And this film does it.
This film does it really well. Like even the flashing lights and stuff. That, you know, I feel like it's something that visually like elevates what could just be a load of people sitting in a room.
Really well, because like when you think of a biopic, you think it has to be historical accuracy and stuff like that. But if you're doing a biopic that's like a deep delve into the mind of someone, it does kind of give you that freedom. If it's a mentally troubled person, to have these kind of weird visions and stuff, because it adds to the sense of their mental instability, which both Oppenheimer and his wife seem to clearly struggle with.
Well, that's the thing, like the kind of cosmic horror vibe of him. I really like the cut where it's before it goes into his origin story, as it were. He's asked the question about studying in Europe, and they're like, oh, were you happier there than you were here? And he goes like, happy? not really, or whatever. And then it cuts to him like weeping in bed with like this long hair. And I'm like, yeah. And then, but yeah, these like flashes of kind of abstract stuff. Like, I kind of wish that either that had carried on in some way, or they'd made a point of like, once he understood the theory, it made these visions make sense.
Yeah.
I feel like there was a little bit of a disconnect between that and then him suddenly just being functional-ish for a bit. Because I was like, okay, this is a really interesting way of kind of visualizing
what's going
through. And I mean, it definitely hooked me. So I was like,
one other thing I just remembered that I thought was fun was him explaining like what happens when a sun collapses, and it's like, and you have something that just drags matter and light in, and it's like the maths prove, we don't know what it is, but the maths proves it. And it's like, oh yeah, because black holes haven't been discovered yet. And I was like if you've got like
and they even say something about like at the party, he's talking about it that night or whatever, and the guy's like, oh, this is what they would look like or whatever, and he's like, well, actually there wouldn't be anything there. And it's like,
it's kind of like, if you've got kind of a decent understanding of space and stuff, you probably get that he's talking about black holes, but obviously they don't have that concept yet. So it's like, this is quite fun.
And it even is tied into the fission and fusion as well, isn't it? It kind of comes from there as well. So
I've got a few bits of trivia. One of the first one, when in the bunker, Oppenheimer says they'll know if the bomb is successful in 1 hour and 52 minutes. The bomb goes off in the movie at the 1 hour 52-minute mark.
Cool.
I was like, that's pretty cool. Pretty much 2/3 in as well, as we kind of said. And I think roughly, I might be a bit off here, but I think the bomb was roughly 2/3 through Oppenheimer's life as well. So that kind of lines up. I don't know how intentional that is, but
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
He was in his 40s when that happened. He died in his 60s, so
that's pretty much,
I reckon if someone did the maths, it might be like, oh no, it's to the minute, that moment in his life. The second bit I've got...
That's why they rushed all the dialogue to get up to that.
The scene of Kitty Oppenheimer refusing to shake Edward Teller's hand after his negative testimony at Oppenheimer security hearing happened in real life. Apparently Edward Teller cried over her public rejection. And it was like, oh, okay.
He was an interesting character, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was it Benny Safdie or the other Safdie?
I can't remember. But yeah, he was kind of oppositional, but also clearly kind of admired Oppenheimer.
Yeah,
but
Benny Safdie,
yeah, I remember, I think I mentioned him a couple of times in the report, but not in much detail. And I remember reading one of the things that came out when it was like Oppenheimer's security hearing was whether science was going to go with Oppenheimer's more like progressive, almost left-wing view on science, or Edward Teller's more conservative view on science.
Right, which is, in this, it's the H-bomb or not, basically, is how they tell it in this, isn't it? Yeah, interesting.
But he was a fun character, because like...
He's basically just a little twat, really, wasn't he? But but also, you kind of got his vibe a little bit.
Yeah, like... you can tell that him and Oppenheimer kind of respect each other. There's the bit like when he goes to storm off, he even almost like asks Oppenheimer permission to leave, because it's like they do kind of have that level of understanding.
Yeah.
And obviously they go have that conversation outside and it's like, do what you want. But yeah, I think it was a fun... I wasn't expecting him to have the accent.
No.
I think when I read about the character being called Edward Teller, I just thought they'd have an American accent.
Yeah, I mean, Benny Safdie is American as well, so...
the character might have been German or something.
So it was Jack Quaid playing Richard Feynman?
Yeah.
I thought so, but I don't remember them ever saying his name.
No, nor do I. I only realised after when I like looked at the credits.
I was thinking about...
Oh, he was Feynman.
Because in the comic Manhattan Projects, he was like the young one. He was like a little bit kind of...
Yeah, and he is young at the time. And he
don't know what the word's like. Kind of pretty boy, kind of, you know, young pretty boy.
And he's kind of that in
this
exactly,
as well.
Yeah. And I think there's a few, like, because Josh Peck plays Kenneth Bainbridge. I don't think they ever mention his name because he does not look like a Kenneth.
I think he is literally in one scene as well, isn't he?
He's in a couple...
he might be in a group shots, actually, yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple when Oppenheimer, he goes his, like, recruiting tour.
That's what,
he's in that bit. And then he's at the bomb site. He's the one that is like hovering over the button.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. Who's the one who he gets recruited in the corridor of like a university and then he leaves?
I have no idea.
Yeah, because he's the one who like Groves is kind of bullying him.
Yeah,
and Oppenheimer's just like, nah, you got to take it.
I thought Casey Affleck was fun in like that scene. He was something Pash. He was like the security guy.
Oh
on
shit,
the base.
that was him.
He's in like that one scene, like he's like fucking terrifying just by like talking, and you're like,
right, fuck,
yeah.
Matt Damon was pretty good, wasn't he?
Yeah, Matt Damon was good, and he kind of
nailed the vibe that I was expecting.
Exactly that. Yeah. The other bit of trivia I've got is the Trinity detonation scene uses a combination of practical effects and digital compositing. Multiple explosions were performed practically with a hybrid of gasoline, propane, aluminium, magnesium substances involving big miniatures. These were filmed at high speeds from multiple angles and then layered using digital effects to create the iconic mushroom cloud.
Right, okay.
So they basically made a big explosion to miniatures and then layered them on top of each other.
Made them look,
It looked really good.
It looked really good, yeah. There was some lovely little close-ups, and you can see that it was real fire. You know, you can tell most of the time.
And they do some like close-ups, and just like I think in the cinema as well, like. It's one of those films that is worth seeing in the big screen because it just covers up your entire like vision, just like fuck.
Very bright, and then the sound coming in as well. As we said, it really gives you the impression you've just been in a nuclear blast.
But I think that is Oppenheimer. We've been kind of looking forward to this film for at least I think we mentioned it in the main podcast like a year and a half ago in Project News. So it's been a long time coming, and for me it paid off. I think I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You answered the question there though.
So which does lead me into the question of whether or not this lived up to the hype. Proj or Proj no?
Yes, Proj yes. I think especially watching the two Nolan films we did watch, you can really see his progression. Not necessarily that those are worse films, but you can see where he came from, and you can see how they all impacted it, and I really enjoyed it.
And me too. I definitely Proj. One other thing I was actually going to ask you before we kind of end this is where this ranks for you in Christopher Nolan films.
Okay.
So I've got the list in front of me here if you want me to read
I'll get it up as well, but if you read it through for the listeners.
Following, which I haven't seen.
Yes.
Memento we covered recently. Insomnia I haven't seen. And then you've got Batman Begins, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, Inception, Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Tenet, and Oppenheimer. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 films. I've seen 10 of them.
Real difficult.
That they are all really good. Like the 10 I've seen are all really good.
I haven't. I'm same as you. I haven't seen Insomnia or Following. And I feel like having only seen Memento the one time quite recently, I'd find it hard to place that. I think. Like, I've always thought of Batman Begins as kind of lower than the other two, but I think if I rewatched it, I think I would like it way.
I used to think that, but I rewatched it a couple of years ago.
It's more comic booky, isn't it, than the other ones?
I think Dark Knight Rises is
the lowest.
Lower. And I think Batman Begins and The Dark Knight are pretty on par. People love The Dark Knight because the Joker, but I think Batman Begins is absolutely banging.
I'm thinking if I just do it from kind of gut, I would probably say I'm going to just start with Dark Knight, and I'm then going to go Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar. I'll probably put Oppenheimer above Memento, to be honest. Oppenheimer, Memento. I'm just going to put Batman Begins there because I don't know where else it would go. Oh, Prestige though. Fuck.
I was keep thinking, I was like, I won't try and list them, but I was like, what are my top 5? And I'm like, in my top 5, I'll include Memento, Batman Begins, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, Inception, Tenet, and Oppenheimer. But that's 7 films.
Yeah, I would say it's probably it's either top 5 or just out of it. I would say it's above. It's easy to say that it's above. It's above Tenet for me. It was okay. If I saw it again, I might like it more. It's above Tenet, it's above Dunkirk, and it's above Begins and Rises.
Right. Yeah, I think for me, it's above Dunkirk, Interstellar, and Dark Knight Rises. Definitely.
Yeah.
Maybe also above Batman Begins and The Prestige, and maybe Inception. But then it gets to the point where it's just like, these are all like,
I think
at least like 9 out of 10 films.
It's quite similar to The Prestige, actually, in a lot of ways. The way that the story is told, I feel like compared to a lot of other films, because it has a combination of stories being told and kind of flicking back and forth. I know Nolan films do that a lot, but more so than some of the others, it kind of reminded me of that.
And but The Prestige is probably one of the only ones that also features a real life person, because David Bowie plays Tesla in that, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. Yeah.
So usually it's all weird world, but no. But yeah, either way, it's hard to say.
It's hard to say, but either in top 5 or just out of it for both of us.
Yeah, so, which is quite impressive considering that list of films.
And just one watch as well.
Yeah. I would like to watch it again. Maybe not soon, but like, because it's 3 hours long. But as soon as I get the chance, it'd be nice watching it, like knowing everything, getting info and seeing what still hits and stuff. But that brings us to the end of this episode of the Silver Screen Project. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, if you want to check out more stuff like this, we've got the Project on the same podcast channel.
Yeah, which you can listen to my version of the real events.
Yes, you can. Plus all sorts of other stuff.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.